So when we talk about ideas for businesses, we usually talk about 4 different types of businesses: micro squared, micro, small, and growth venture. Micro squared, one-person firms. We'll talk about each of these. Micro is you've hired people. Small is you've gotten big enough that you need to create an organization and middle management layer. And a growth venture is the one that gets all the publicity. You know, people put together a team, write a business plan, go raise some money, and then they become big overnight. Well, we're going to see what some of the issues are for each of those businesses, again, and why you want to get a job first. And the bigger the business you're going for, the bigger the idea. So if you're going to start a one-person business, you don't need much experience. You don't need to do much. But if you have dreams of starting a bigger business or something that's going to grow, then you're going to need to have a bigger idea. So again, how do you get that bigger idea? Learn from on somebody else's nickel. So micro squared. Micro squared businesses are people who are self-employed, or groups of self-employed who work together but no one works for the other. So it doesn't mean you're just kind of cutting lawns by yourself. Lots of times companies, people start their one-person firms and they work in networks with other people. They get fairly sophisticated. But a simple thing here is you take a look. The more technical training, the more experience you have, the more money you can make. And by the way, this is probably the most likely business you're going to start. 76% of all businesses in the U.S. are one-person firms. And this has been the main way of job creation since 2001. One-person firms have just skyrocketed in the U.S. Employment in big companies has gone down. We're in a recession now. What do you think the job market's going to be like? It's going to be bad. What happened, what continues to go in bad economic times? One-person firms. So this might be something you'd be very interested in doing, because you're more likely to be able to do this than get a job. But one of the things you want to take a look at is that you're going to do something that's worth your while, as opposed to trying to get a job someplace. So a simple thing, took a look at the average earnings of self-employed people, and you can see what happens, what we talked about. The more training you have, the more experience you have, the more money you're going to make. Anybody can start a beauty salon, or almost anybody, do the nails, stuff. You can start a landscaping business, you can make some money. But as you go up into more experience, let's say you have a payroll business, or you have training, become a plumber, you become a physician, what happens? The money you make goes up. The great thing about these numbers is these are all fraudulent because these come off of tax returns. Great thing about being self-employed is a lot of stuff doesn't get reported, and stuff that you spend somehow becomes a business expense. I had one of my students come back to class who had a business, and he was telling the class how he bought this big fish tank and all these exotic fish. And guess what that was? That was a business expense. So some of these, actually, when you take a look at these numbers, if you're going to do it full time and you're going to be more honest about it, you can jack these up by at least 50%. So the average physician, self-employed physician, would be making $120,000 a year. But again, the more experience you have, the more training you have, the more money you're going to make. A micro business. A micro business is a business which the entrepreneur has hired people and they all report into him or her. So now you've made the shift and you've actually hired somebody. What's the issue for you here? You have to get your revenue up quite a bit to cover the cost of the employee and to cover you. And what happens to most people once they hire? Their personal income goes down. Because who is it that you have to pay first? You have to pay the employee. So you've got to have a pretty big idea for your business if you want to come out ahead. Because the first thing that happens, you hire somebody you have to pay that person first, and you get whatever is left over. So if your business idea isn't big enough to cover that, you're going to lose money. In fact, only 2/3 of businesses survive hiring a person. It's one of the riskiest things you can do. And it's usually because people, again, started with a small idea because they didn't have any experience in the industry to be able to come up with a bigger idea. A small business is the next level when you've grown big enough that you set up a middle management layer. You start to build an organization. You're no longer a doer, you're an administrator. So you hire managers to hire the people. So the number of people working in the business or the number of locations have increased so that the entrepreneur cannot manage everyone. And this is probably where you start to think about going out to get a bank loan. How many of you think you can get a bank loan when you start your company? You need 2 to 3 years of positive cash flow before a bank will give you a loan. And if you think an SBA guaranteed loan is anything different, it's not. It guarantees the bank. They want to see 2 to 3 years of positive cash flow. That means your business has to be to a certain size before you can get a bank loan. So once you get your business up to a certain size and you have that positive cash flow, then you can think about getting a bank loan. But guess what else the bank wants to see from you? Industry experience. So you go into a bank and say, well, I've just started this business, and by the way, I'm making a little bit of money, and I've never been in this business before. What's the likelihood you're going to get a loan? It goes to about 0. So again, even if you want to start a small business, you're going to need some industry experience to make it work. And finally, a growth venture. This is the one that everybody gets excited about. And this is started by a team of people in order to create and grow a large company. And by a large company, I mean we want to get it up to about 500 people as quickly as possible, or bigger. We had a student here who graduated a couple of years ago. He hired 1,700 people in his company 2 years ago. That's good growth. People like to see stuff like that. This is probably the least likely thing you're ever going to do, though. This is the least like of all businesses. And the other thing with the growth ventures, you're going to have to go out and raise money to be able to do this. This isn't anything you're going to be able to finance on your own. So you're going to have to go to investors to raise money and then eventually go public. Well, guess what investors are going to look for? What's the number one thing they look for? Industry experience. So you go out to them, they're going to say, hey, we like your idea, but you're not the right people for the idea. When you go to venture capitalists, they specialize by industry or technology. So they see thousands of business plans in their industry and their technology. How many unique business plans do you think they see? They're not unique. Good ones, they see 1 or 2. They see very few things that are unique. That's why they'll never sign a non-disclosure with you. We get students come in and say, oh, I got to go talk to this investor. Can I get him to sign a non-disclosure? And the answer is no. Why? Because if they don't invest in you and then they see a similar business plan 6 months later and invest in them, if they sign a non-disclosure, you could sue them because they're going to see similar business ideas all the time because they specialize that way. What makes the difference to them if they're seeing similar business ideas and similar business plans? What makes the difference between investment and non-investment?
There's got to be some there.
Well, the biggest there is the team. And the team needs to have industry experience. So they'll come back and say, well, nice plan, but we're not going to bet on your team because you're a bunch of novices. You don't have industry experience, as opposed to we're going to bet on this team. It's a much better team.